Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the Daily News Analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start our today's discussion by taking up the important articles which are featuring on our screens from the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. So let's take up our first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Address Stigma in Mental Health, says the Lancet Commission." Now, Lancet is the premier magazine in terms of science in the science field, and the Lancet Commission has asked to address the stigma in mental health in India and around the world. Why is this article appearing? This is on the occasion of the World Mental Health Day, which is globally celebrated on the 10th of October. And whilst much attention is being given to mental health in the recent times, whenever the International Mental Health Day comes, more attention is given to this day. But mere attention on this issue is itself a very big step, because the concept of mental health is very, very crucial for India. It is not just very hush-hush or less talked about in India, but silently it is becoming a very hidden and deep crisis for India and as well as other people around the world. How is this so? So through this article, we'll try to understand the state of mental health in India, as to what exactly are the problems that Indians are facing and what is the extent of the mental health problems and what is being done to treat these mental health problems. So let's understand by keeping few data in perspective. First is that we need to focus upon is that the World Health Organization had termed India to be the most depressed country in the year 2018. This was a big wake-up call for all of us, where WHO had given India the tag of the most depressed country, which meant that most number of patients who can be termed as depressed were being found in India. That is why India got the tag. And when in the same report, WHO tried to calculate the cumulative economic loss that occurs to the world GDP when human beings go through mental conditions. So according to the same report by WHO, the economic loss due to mental health conditions between 2012 and 2030 is estimated to be around US 1.03 trillion globally. Now one might assume that how does human beings suffering from mental health conditions can occur or can incur such huge economic costs? Because when the mental conditions of human beings itself are not good, their productivity lessens, and that is why it automatically creates a direct impact on loss in the economic activity. And when we talk about India, there are only 3,000 psychiatrists in a 130 crore population of India. So this shows us, these few data points shows the dismal situation, which is why it makes very significant and crucial for us to have a discussion on the mental health sector of India. So after having understood what the scenario is globally and where India is placed, it is very important to understand that India as a country is plagued by mental health diseases in the most, one can say the most significant form, where already it was termed as the most depressed. And in India, it is found that more and more people are coming into the fold of mental health diseases, and it is said that 1 in every 7 Indians is currently going through a mental health problem. This trend of increasing mental health diseases is not just seen in India, but is seen all around the world, especially after the pandemic. The pandemic showed us as to what are the real things that matter, and what came out in 4 was the increased amount of mental problems that people are starting to have or are currently facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the other impacts it left on people. So this is the current state of the mental health situation in India and around in the world. But when we talk about India and the mental health sector, what are the core issues that are plaguing this sector? So let's look at those core issues. When we talk about the core issues that plague the mental health sector in India, first is, as we saw the data, the lack of mental health professionals in India. Whenever we talk about mental health, so in the foray of mental health, all the diseases or disorders that exist of the mind, the mental disorders, those become the part of the mental health ambit for the human beings. And these are all kinds of diseases such as anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, all these sorts of and other various kinds of disorders such as schizophrenia. All these diseases together make up the mental health ambit. And then when we talk about more and more people facing these diseases, what is important is that more number of professionals, medical professionals are required to treat these diseases. But India itself first lacks on this first step itself, wherein we saw that there are only about 4,000 psychiatrists and 3,000 psychologists for the whole country. This shows that in terms of demand supply only, there arises a huge gap where the patients are rising and the number of professionals who treat these diseases is dismally low, right? So it means that there are only 0.3 psychiatrists per 1 lakh population in India versus the desirable number of 3 psychiatrists per 1 lakh population. So this figure is given by the WHO, where it says that for at least 1 lakh per 1 lakh population, at least there should be 3 psychiatrists, but we are way dismally low than that as well. So many of the mental health professionals in India, what they do, they make a move to UK and USA for greener pastures. So the young graduates who are graduating in the field of psychology find better opportunities in the countries of UK and US. And that is why we are not yet able to hold the talent in India. And why is this happening? This is again happening because due to not having enough lucrative and adequate job opportunities. So how many organizations do we see in India which have mental health professionals, role of mental health professionals in their organization? If we take the case of America, in United States, there are estimated 1,81,700 psychologist jobs with an estimated increase in job growth of 14%, which means that these countries are facing increased relevance of jobs which have the role of mental health professionals. When the demand of these jobs will increase, the rise of the mental health professionals in India will increase too. So it is very important that India takes these steps, and when we mean India, the corporates and the other organizations realize the importance of protecting the mental health of their citizens and therefore giving dedicated space towards inculcating and evolving a culture of treating mental health as well as keeping professionals in their organization. So this automatically will create jobs for the new graduates in this field. And then the other aspect of mental health which plagues the population is not just in the adult range, but also the young adolescent population, where the school-going children, the college-going children also face these problems. And after the pandemic, when the education went digital and young students just lost their touch with physical education, these problems have just increased. And that is why NCERT, which is the premier education policy body of India, came out with the guidelines on early identification and intervention for mental health problems in school-going children and adolescents. They realized this problem, and that is why NCERT has put out fresh guidelines. And under these guidelines, the primary motive that these guidelines provide, the mandate these guidelines provide to the schools, is that they should also start having dedicated professionals in their premises to treat, to counsel, and to take care of the mental health of the students that exists in the premises and campus. So even this is happening. So gradually, when the opportunities for jobs start to increase for the young graduates in the field, that is when the talent will also stay in India and the quality and quantity of the professionals will also increase. Second, therefore, comes an issue of lack of quality. It flows from the first problem. When there is lack of opportunities in the field, the quality would also not be found, and therefore this is also a major issue where the importance of teaching several forms of counseling, post-traumatic stress disorder, or what we call PTSD counseling, family counseling, mental disorder counseling, hypnosis, can only be taught of vocational subjects that are included in the curriculum. What this means is that we still need a revolution in the educational sector of psychology, where the education is also so robust that the quality education that students need in this field is available in India first. So that becomes our second point of working, and therefore the quality of the medical professionals is not that good currently. Third issue becomes of the which mostly every one of us face when we go to take medical or avail mental medical treatment, is that it is very expensive. The charges for the therapists and the psychologists is exorbitantly high, and we always keep complaining about it. And for a person who wants to cure his mental ailment, if he has to shell a lot of money into that regard, that becomes a very counterproductive aspect in that manner. And that is why the affordability aspect of mental health care is also a very important area to look at. And all of this will again improve when we make jobs possible, we make the quality improved, and that is where the affordability of the mental health healthcare services will also take place. And the fourth most important issue, which we all know, which results in the mental health sector right now, is about the stigma of mental health. It's talking about problems that the mind faces. All of these problems are often, trivialized, or people live in denial, or they're not able to accept, or even if they accept or come to know, they're unwilling to share with the other people because they feel that they might be embarrassed in front of everyone. But what we need to understand is that having a mental problem is as similar to having a physical problem. Whenever we have a fever or we have a nose running, do we get embarrassed about it? Similarly, if we find that there's a problem in our mind and we're facing from a mental issue which is hampering our day-to-day lives, it's as obvious and it's as normal as having a physical problem. And the positive step in this regard is that this stigma is breaking, at least in the young population of India. So the positives in this field is that, let's first look at this positive point and then we look at the government's efforts. So the positive point is that with respect to this stigma, Practo, which is the leading healthcare app in India, which makes online consultation with doctors possible, it has found out that young Indians are actively taking care of their mental health, and there is 44% increase in consultation. This shows that the app is seeing more number of young individuals wanting to seek mental treatment, right, for their everyday mental problems. So this shows a positive trend in this direction where people are accepting their problems and also are being open to treat their diseases. And among this, 57% of these queries are from the people in the age group of 25 to 34, which shows that they are young Indians. And from these, 61 were from males and 39% were from females. So this is the positive trend in this direction. So what does this tell us? It shows us that there are various problems plaguing the system right now, and certain positive steps also have been taken in this regard. So what has the government done with respect to the improving the sector, mental health sector in this regard? So first of all, the Supreme Court, the primary important thing which happened was that the Supreme Court identified right to physical health care and mental health care to be a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. This was a pivotal step that happened, and after that, the Union government enacted the Mental Health Care Act of 2017. This was in furtherance with the objective of providing a fundamental right and the right to ensure the fundamental right to mental health care, and it guarantees every affected person access to mental health care and treatment from services run or funded by the government. Now, this is the noble mission under this act, but how much does it get translated into reality is still a task ahead for us. So, this is a step in the right direction, but much more steps are needed to be taken, and actions need to be taken on the issues that we discussed on this particular aspect. So, this was a discussion where we delved into the state of mental health in India as to how India is at the center of which needs a revolution in mental health sector, and what are the current issues and actions that are being taken on those, right? So with this, we finish this article, and let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Throttled at the Grassroots, How to Strengthen the Decentralized Governance. Now, this particular article features in the newspaper because of the 30 years completion which is going to happen in December of the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act of the Constitution. Most of us would be aware of the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act to the Constitution. These were the landmark amendments that were made in our Constitution to fulfill the need of decentralized governance in our Indian political system. What do we mean by decentralized governance? It means devolving powers to the lower tiers of the government. So earlier, where there existed a two-tier government at the central and state level, a third tier was introduced through the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, which basically provided local self-governance systems in the panchayati, as in the form of panchayati raj institutions for the villages, and for the cities, the municipal corporations. So this was the landmark amendment which was done, and it was done in the year 1992. Therefore, this year, they complete 30 years of their initiation. But what the question that remains to be asked is that what has happened after the 30 years of their coming into the Constitution? Has it resulted into democratic decentralization? This is what the article makes a case for, that this democratic decentralization actually has been a failure. where we feel that there were provisions engraved in the constitution to devolve powers, to give independence and autonomy to the local self-government to treat the matters of their area on their own. But we see that when we go onto the ground, this has not been realized completely. And there exist again age-old problems which is making difficult the powers that should go on to the local self-government level. They are not going. So what are these issues? So according to the author, who has been the secretary in Panchayati Raj Ministry for the government of Karnataka, having seen the issues at ground, he highlights the issues which plague the Panchayati Raj institutions, or the third tier of the government, which we call the local self-government tier. So whenever we talk about the issues of local self-government or the third tier of the government, there are always issues in three forms which these institutions are facing. These three issues are of funds, functions and functionary, which means that on these three F's, funds, functions and functionary, it is seen that these local self-government tiers are facing a problem. What does this mean? When we talk about funds, if this government tier is there, who is giving them the funds to run their own administration? So as per the 73rd and 74th amendments, much of the fund devolving powers is being given to the center and the state, which means that how much funds will the local self-government institutions will receive, that would be decided by the state government. And this automatically calls for a recipe in hijacking of the process, where if the local self-governments do not have a control over their own fund collecting systems, it will never ensure that the local self-government system is efficient. Therefore, it is seen that money is not adequately devolved to their level, and even if it is devolved through the finance commission grants or state grants, it is very inflexible, which means that it is given only for that purpose, a particular work, and money would be used only for that purpose. So therefore, local self-government systems always face a problem of inadequate funds, and little investment is being done in letting the panchayats collecting their own taxes. That is why this primary problem which is there, it is not enough work is being done even right now to make them allocate enough tax collecting powers. Then the second problem comes of functions, wherein the states are the one to decide or to delegate functions to the local self-government. This also creates impediment often between the relations between state and the local self-government. Then we have the problem of functionaries. Functionaries, or what we can say who are the officers and workers working in this tier. So all the officers and workers who are working in this tier are generally not belonging, or the local self-government does not have the adequate control over these officers. So one can say that a district collector is working at a district level, but the Panchayati Raj institutions won't have much power over him. And these officers would be the officers sent from the central level or the state level, sent on deputation. So this creates a problem of accountability between each other, and that is why the local self-government systems are also not able to control their functionaries. So they are either not enough, or those who are sent on deputation, and therefore the authority would not be of the Panchayati Raj officers, and they would be listening to the state and central governments. Then the other issue in this aspect is of the increased centralization that has taken place in the country. We know that the systems of governance in our country has been increasingly centralized in the past few years, right? Whenever a government which is led by a strong leader comes into the country, he or she wants the power to be kept in his own hands only. So this has led to excessive centralization in our country, which is visible in a lot of ways. Now this centralization obviously will become a big enemy in devolving powers to the lowest form of governments. So this centralization has also created a problem where officers are just following orders because they are sent from the center, and they are not accountable to the people of that area or the Panchayati Raj representatives who are there. And next issue is about the corruption, where the author does accept that there is high level of corruption going on in the lowest forms of government, but he says that then there is corruption in every form of government, and it is not the decentralization principle that is creating the corruption. If at all we have to stop this corruption, the author feels that decentralization is the way to go, because when the local self-government systems have the mandate to collect their own taxes, and they genuinely feel accountable to the citizens of that particular area, they would be much more accountable. So the author feels that decentralization is not the problem of a cause of this corruption problem, rather it can be a possible solution for it. So these are the issues that plague the local self-government tier right now. So what are the reforms that the author suggests? First, they suggest that the Gram Sabhas, which are the nodal bodies which work at this level, these committees in urban areas have to be revitalized, which means that the real power of the Gram Sabha needs to be realized, wherein the definition of a Gram Sabha is that it is an association of voters, but it is generally taken in the sense of just a meeting of people. But it is not that. A Gram Sabha has a lot of powers, and those powers need to be again properly restored with the Gram Sabha. Second is that the local self-government organization structures have to be strengthened, which means that the panchayats are burdened with a huge amount of work that other departments thrust on them without being compensated for the extra administrative cost. This again comes to the power of functions and functionaries and funds, where if the functions are given to them, there isn't any funds for them to take up with the work, and if even the power is given, the functionaries are less for them to carry out such a large task. That is why the problems always exist in these three areas. Third is the local self-governments must be enabled to hold the state departments accountable. When the state is devolving them powers, state is devolving them funds, there has to be a mechanism in which the local self-government system can keep the state government accountable to provide quality, corruption-free service to them and through service level agreements. So there has to be a system for that as well. And third is, we cannot have an accountable Gram Panchayats without local taxation. This is also an issue we discussed, wherein we need to devolve tax collecting powers to this level so that they feel directly responsible about the money collected by them, and it increases accountability in that system. So these are the reforms that the author suggests about the issues that are plaguing the Panchayati Raj and the municipal corporation system, or the local self-government tier in the Indian governance system. So we finish the article over here, and with this, let's move on to our third article for the day. The next article which appears in the screen reads, Building Resilient Mineral Supply Chains. Now this is again an important article which features in the newspaper, which talks about the importance and economics of the rare earth metals. The rare earth metals are often in news, and they are the building blocks, or one can say the fuel elements which power the new age technologies. So through this article, we'll understand what exactly are the rare earth metals, how these metals are playing their role in the global world order, and which are the countries which are again winning the war, right? And what is India doing in the rare earth metal sector? So let's first understand what are rare earth metals. These rare earth metals, as the name suggests, they are found in the earth's crust, which are a group of 17 elements known as lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium, neodymium, promethium, samarium, europium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, holmium, erbium, thulium, ytterbium, lutetium, scandium and yttrium. We don't have to remember the names of all the rare earth elements, but we should have a general idea that these are the set of 17 elements. So these rare earth elements are fitted into these today's new age technologies, which make the revolutionary products that we use possible. And therefore they are lustrous, silvery, white, soft, heavy metals, and they have unusual fluorescent, conductive and magnetic properties, which make them very useful when alloyed or mixed in small quantities with more common metals such as iron. However, with the exception of the highly unstable promethium, rare earth elements are found in relatively high concentrations in the earth's crust. So though they are found in high concentrations, since they are difficult to extract out of the ore, that is why they are known as rare earth metals. So what is the usage of the rare earth metals? These rare earth metals or minerals are very crucial for India in order to reduce the energy burden. It is said that these rare earth metals could fire the unconventional energy sources that India is keen to embark upon, because India has a rising import bill, because it imports 85% of its crude oil requirements. It imports more than 0.5% of its natural gas requirements. So India obviously wants to decrease this import bill, and that is why it wants to shift on the green energy alternatives, and rare earth metals are a way to make that possible. So it is an important component in the manufacture of hybrid vehicles, fuel cells and LEDs as well. So it is powering all these equipments, and it is also indispensable in the manufacture of advanced defense equipments as well. And it is also used in the manufacture of mobile phones, computers, digital networks, optical fiber cables, and other IT gadgets which would help in our Digital India program. So this is the multifaceted use of the rare earth metals, and therefore it is very crucial as to the major countries having their hold with respect to the supply of these rare earth metals complete for them. And which are the countries which are in control of the supply of the rare earth metals? No points for guessing that. That would be China. China alone accounts for 44 million tons, which is followed by Brazil and Vietnam. So the total reserves are estimated at 121 million tons, and out of that, China not only holds the largest reserves of rare earth metals, but it also leads in the production of rare earth metals and products associated with it. It holds the leading position among producers of rare earth with 140,000 tons production per year. And it accounts for 90% of the world's rare earth production. That's how heavily dominated China's role is in the rare earth sector. And that is why it's very difficult to let one country have monopoly in this particular aspect. And the other major producers are Australia, USA, Russia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And concentrates partially processed intermediate products are further processed at many locations in Europe, USA, Japan, and China. So the major countries involved in the rare earth metal trade is China, USA, Russia, Australia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Apart from these countries, all other countries have to import their rare earth requirements from these countries. And therefore, India is also a heavy importer in this aspect. But the key point with respect to India is that India has the world's 5th largest reserves of rare earth metals, which again shows that India has the reserves, but it is not able to tap on those reserves. So in India, monazite sand, right? This is a form of sand found especially in the coasts of Kerala. It is the principal source of rare earths and thorium. These rare earth elements contribute a total value of nearly $200 billion to the Indian economy. That's how important they are. And India, as I mentioned, has the world's 5th largest reserves of rare earth elements, nearly twice as much as Australia, but it imports most of its rare earth needs in finished from geopolitical rival China. That is what India wants to improve. And here is where the author suggests some measures that should be taken by India to increase or improve its supply chain role in the rare earth element space. So first, the author suggests is that we should be figuring out the mineral requirements of our domestic industry. He first says that the first part of the reform is that we should have a clear sense of how much rare earth elements are we requiring. Then to coordinate with the domestic industry to determine where strategic interventions by the government would be necessary for the purpose. This would be the second step. And third, if conducive investments opportunities don't exist, Kabil, this is the Khanij Anna Videsh India Limited. This is a public sector enterprises incorporated by the government of India, especially for its overseas investments in the rare earth sector. So this is a PSU. The author suggests that this should preemptively sign offtake agreements with global mineral suppliers to secure future production. And the fourth one is that the government should jointly invest in mining assets with geostrategic partners. This means that India should be actively engaged in buying the rare earth mine sites in other countries. So in this case, Kabil can be, this particular public sector enterprise can play a role where it should make equity investments in mining jurisdictions that provide private sector investors may deem too risky. So this is another way that the author is suggesting. It should leverage government to government partnerships to mitigate investment risks. The fifth one is that support technologies that utilize domestically available materials. This is to again support the domestic industry with respect to the rare earth sector. And lastly, develop policies on urban mining aimed at recycling mineral inputs from deployments that have completed their useful life. What this means is that those products which we are already using and have a presence of rare earth elements in them, we should have a clear repository or a standard operating protocol to reuse and recycle these products from the, when they complete their life. And this is how we'll be able to again lessen our import and rely more on the domestic industries can play a role in this. So this was a discussion on the rare earth metal sector in India and what India can do to improve its supply in this particular space. So this was a discussion today on the important articles. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.